Have you ever felt a quiet warning in your chest, a flicker in your mind, telling you something isn't right? And yet, you stayed. Perhaps you whispered to yourself, I can handle this. I understand them. They'll change. And then, almost inevitably, the betrayal comes again and again. It's bewildering. You might find yourself questioning, has my intuition failed? Or is my sensitivity more of a burden than a gift? But what if the problem isn't your intuition at all? What if the deeper truth lies in how attachment, hope, and compassion quietly guide the choices of an empathic heart? The Buddha taught that seeing clearly is not the same as being free. Even those who sense truth can become caught in cycles of betrayal if awareness isn't paired with wisdom. In this video, you'll explore why intuition doesn't fail, why betrayals can repeat, and how an empath can act with clarity so that insight protects the heart rather than leaving it bruised. So, ask yourself, if your intuition is strong, why do betrayals still happen? The answer is closer than you imagine, and it begins with understanding the heart, the mind, and the subtle choices that shape your experience as an empath. The paradox of seeing and suffering. Sensitive hearts often perceive subtle shifts, misalignments, and unspoken cues before consequences unfold. Yet awareness alone does not shield from discomfort, disappointment, or betrayal. In this section, we explore the tension between clear perception and the heart's attachments, hope, and compassion, revealing why insight without discernment can still leave an empath vulnerable, and how understanding this interplay is the first step toward emotional freedom. Seeing clearly does not shield from suffering. Even the most sensitive and intuitive empaths can be caught off guard. You may sense someone's intentions, notice hesitation in their voice, feel the subtle tension in a gesture, and still find yourself walking into situations that shake your heart. At first, it feels as if your senses have betrayed you. How could intuition, meant to guide and protect, allow harm to touch someone so attuned? The Buddha offers a perspective that reframes this experience. Seeing clearly is not the same as being shielded from suffering. Insight, the ability to perceive the nature of people and circumstances, can coexist with pain if attachment lingers unexamined. An empath may notice subtle duplicity, self-interest, or shifting loyalties, and yet remain entangled because the heart clings to hope, longing, or the illusion of permanence. Imagine visiting a friend whose house has a leaking roof. Rain drips steadily into a bucket near your seat. You notice it immediately, that quiet warning at the edge of your awareness. And yet, you stay. You keep talking, even as a low discomfort settles beneath your attention. I shouldn't upset them, your mind whispers. It's fine. I can handle this. Each drop becomes a subtle signal of misalignment. Each small puddle, a reminder. This is not fully comfortable. Your intuition senses the risk, the imbalance, the discomfort. And yet, your heart remains tethered by care, by patience, by hope that things will be made right. You remain, even as the puddle grows and the warnings accumulate, each one a quiet insistence that something is unresolved. The tension between awareness and attachment is palpable. The senses speak clearly, but the heart moves to a different rhythm, one shaped by loyalty, empathy, and desire. Think of the empath who's invested years in a friendship, a family tie, or a community role. They have shown up during crises, remembered birthdays, carried conversations when others fell silent. Over time, something shifts. Messages arrive later. Care feels conditional. Warmth appears mainly when it is needed, rather than freely given. The empath notices, not dramatically, but steadily, and still, they remain. History has a gravity of its own. What has been shared does not release its hold easily. Seeing becomes possible without movement following. Awareness and attachment sit side by side, not because the empath lacks intelligence or strength, but because devotion has its own logic, one rooted in meaning, memory, and the hope that what once flowed naturally might return. There is a quiet gravity in this experience. This is not cynicism, nor a call to harden the heart. It is the raw, lived reality of sensitivity. A mind that perceives nuances others miss, a heart that feels every subtle shift, a body that responds to unspoken currents. An empath's awareness can illuminate what is happening, yet it cannot by itself prevent the discomfort, disappointment, or betrayal that may unfold. The world, in its impermanence and unpredictability, continues its quiet testing. Even when intuition flares with warning, even when subtle signals appear in gestures, tones, and pauses, the empath can feel caught in an intricate web where seeing does not equal safety. Awareness is vivid, but attachment, hope, and the longing for connection can carry the heart into the puddles that intuition already notices. Even in the aftermath of betrayal, the pattern remains. Intuition has spoken, subtle signs were present, yet the heart was tethered elsewhere. The tension between perception and attachment, between empathy and endurance, leaves a lingering ache, the recognition that clarity does not guarantee protection. It is a quiet paradox of sensitivity, to see deeply, to feel vividly, and yet to be drawn into suffering, not because insight fails, but because the heart is intricately involved in what it loves. When attachment mutes inner warnings. As an empath, there are moments when a subtle hesitation stirs, a quiet misalignment whispers at the edges of awareness, and yet the heart does not respond. You notice the cracks, repeated excuses, half-truths, gestures that fall just short of integrity, and still you remain. The mind registers each irregularity, but the heart leans toward hope, toward loyalty, toward the longing to maintain connection, muffling the signals that intuition offers. Attachment is quiet, insidious. It does not demand, it does not command. It persuades with gentleness, with tenderness, that staying matters more than noticing, that the measure of care is endurance rather than clarity. You may convince yourself that patterns are temporary, that the other will rise to their better self, that you alone must carry the weight of care for both yourself and the other. And still, the flicker of intuition persists, quietly insistent, yet subdued beneath devotion and compassion. Perhaps it is a friend who borrows time, attention, or energy repeatedly, promising change, yet slipping back into familiar habits. Each lapse registers a hesitation, a forgotten word, a promise left unfulfilled. And yet the history shared, the memories held, the hope for transformation, all soften the edges of warning. Every subtle signal is cushioned by patience, understanding, and care, forming an internal refrain. I can handle this. I will help. They mean well. There is an almost sacred quality in this endurance. It arises from devotion, empathy, and the capacity to feel deeply for another's struggles. And yet, it is precisely this tenderness that can entangle the heart, allowing intuition to flicker without fully guiding response. The paradox is subtle but profound. Attachment magnifies empathy while quietly obscuring perception. The heart becomes fertile ground for hope and care, even as the voice of perception remains faint, restrained by longing and devotion. In this space, the signals persist, subtle, insistent, threading through each interaction, neither silenced nor fully heeded. The tension does not come from intuition itself, but from the interplay between sensing and staying, between the pull of the heart and the quiet nudges of reality. The empath moves along a narrow line, living in the delicate balance between profound care and the risk of being quietly misled by attachment's gentle, persistent insistence. Compassion, untethered from wisdom, invites harm. Compassion is the heartbeat of the empath, the impulse to feel another's pain as one's own. It allows a sensitive person to bend toward suffering, to extend understanding when others would turn away. And yet, when compassion is untethered from discernment, it can become a bridge to repeated harm. As the Buddha said, "True compassion without wisdom is doing without knowing. True wisdom without compassion is knowing without doing." Generosity of heart, when unguarded, may invite expectation, entitlement, or even exploitation. Consider a friend who is constantly in need, not in emergencies, but in ways that slowly sap your energy, patience, or emotional reserves. An empath notices the pattern almost imperceptibly. The friend calls more than they listen, borrows without returning, leans heavily on promises rather than reciprocity. And yet, the empath continues, motivated by the innate drive to help, to ease suffering, to uphold care as a principle. The heart cannot bear turning away. It cannot reconcile letting another struggle when relief is possible. Compassion, once a strength, begins to stretch toward fragility. It is not malice that drives this cycle, nor insensitivity on the empath's part. Rather, the heart's generosity meets the world's impermanence and self-interest. Acts of kindness may be interpreted as obligations by others, while the empath internalizes each unmet expectation as personal failure. Every gesture, however well-intentioned, is filtered through a lens of attachment, the hope that care will elicit gratitude, loyalty, or reciprocity. When that hope goes unmet, the empath feels the weight of betrayal, often questioning their own perception. The pattern is subtle, yet persistent. A colleague repeatedly seeks guidance but ignores advice. A manager relies heavily on your contribution, but delegates or manipulates workloads as if responsibility were theirs alone. A friend leans on you in conflict, but shirks accountability. A partner's vulnerability is selective. All of these interactions reveal a quiet imbalance. The empath senses it in the tension, the pauses, the subtle shifts in tone, yet the desire to remain compassionate overrides hesitation. The heart, tender and steadfast, continues to pour care into spaces that may not be aligned with honesty or integrity. Compassion without boundaries is a paradox. It illuminates the depth of empathy while simultaneously creating vulnerability. It can obscure intuition, blur discernment, and extend patience beyond what the situation warrants. Each act of care becomes a delicate negotiation between generosity and self-preservation, often tipping toward endurance rather than alignment. And in this space, betrayal does not always shout. It seeps quietly, in the form of disappointment, repeated misuse of trust, or unnoticed imbalance. Here, the empath lives the duality of the heart, the capacity to feel profoundly, and the risk of being unmoored by the same tenderness. Compassion is not weakness, nor is it failure. It is a reflection of the profound ability to connect. Yet when exercised without clear boundaries, it can become the very medium through which repeated harm travels, leaving the heart fatigued, uncertain, and tender in ways that hope alone cannot reconcile. When the heart overlooks intuition. Even when intuition speaks, the empath's heart does not always listen. A subtle tightening in the chest, a flicker of unease, a hesitation in thought or feeling. These signals arrive quietly, almost shyly, like shadows at the edge of awareness. And yet, the heart may dismiss them, prioritizing care, loyalty, or hope over the nudges of perception. The whisper of intuition exists, but it competes with the heart's insistence on connection, on believing in the continuity of trust, on assuming the best in others. The tension is constant. The mind registers warning, the body senses misalignment, and the heart negotiates between reality and desire. Each interaction carries the weight of this quiet dissonance. The empath feels it in subtle ways: a momentary doubt, a fleeting discomfort, an unspoken question. These signals are not ignored entirely. They are often held, observed, even rationalized away, creating a delicate balance between awareness and longing. At times, it feels like standing on the edge of a stream, noticing the water rising around your ankles, feeling the cold seep into your bones, yet stepping forward because the current of care urges you onward. Every ripple, every subtle warning is perceptible, undeniable, but the empathy within bends toward connection, toward endurance, toward presence. Intuition exists in the background, illuminating the path, yet it cannot halt the tide of experience that flows over it. Over time, these overlooked intuitions accumulate into a pattern. Each small dismissal of a warning adds a layer to the emotional texture of experience, creating an internal landscape where care and caution coexist uneasily. The empath becomes familiar with this tension, sensing its presence even when it is not fully acknowledged. It is neither weakness nor failure. It is the paradox of profound sensitivity, the capacity to perceive more than most, yet also to endure the pull of the heart when it chooses hope over heed. Here, the empath lives within the quiet friction between intuition and attachment. The signals are persistent, gentle, and often insistent, yet they are met with a heart that yearns, forgives, and hopes. Awareness is present, yet the heart negotiates its own path, caught between perception and longing, between seeing and wanting, between the subtle clarity of insight and the warmth of empathy. Intuition, vivid and insistent, cannot protect the heart from the currents of connection, from the shifting intentions of others, or from the impermanence that shapes every relationship. It can only witness, quietly, the unfolding of misalignment, the subtle fractures that both reveal and deepen the empathic experience. Clinging to permanence in an impermanent world, one of the quietest yet most relentless challenges for an empath is the tension between the heart's longing for consistency and the impermanence inherent in people. Friends, partners, colleagues, or family members, those you hold dear, shift in ways subtle and profound. Priorities change, moods fluctuate, circumstances evolve. The empath senses these shifts, notices the undercurrents, and yet the heart often resists, clinging to what once was, yearning for continuity that cannot be guaranteed. As the Buddha said, attachment is the root of suffering. Each time the empath holds on to what cannot last, each time the heart hopes for permanence in impermanent people, suffering quietly accumulates. Imagine a friend who has always been steady, supportive, reassuring. The empath has felt the rhythm of their presence, the cadence of loyalty, the warmth of understanding. And then, over time, small cracks appear. Forgotten commitments, moments of unresponsiveness, hints of indifference. Each signal registers, yet the heart holds onto history, holding close the idea of permanence as if it could anchor reality. This is the paradox. Sensitivity sharpens perception, yet it does not free the heart from attachment to constancy. The empath experiences a subtle dissonance, a whispered unease that something has shifted, while the mind tries to reconcile the new reality with past experiences. Every gesture, word, or omission becomes magnified, filtered through both the memory of who this person was and the hope for who they could remain. Even the most attuned empath cannot escape this tension. Each interaction becomes a delicate negotiation between the observed reality and the imagined constancy. The whispers of intuition signal change, yet the desire for permanence makes those signals easier to soften, rationalize, or overlook. It is a form of suffering that arises not from the inadequacy of perception, but from the heart's yearning for continuity in a world defined by flux. Here lies a deep, often invisible strain. The empath watches, senses, and remembers, yet the heart continues to hope, to anchor in impermanence, to yearn for stability where none can be guaranteed. It is a tension that both enriches and exhausts, highlighting the empath's profound capacity to care deeply and the inevitable vulnerability that accompanies such attunement. How to break the invisible cycle. The empath is not flawed, nor is perception failing. What repeats is a cycle. Small misalignments accumulate, patterns emerge, yet the heart remains tethered by hope, loyalty, or care. Recognizing the rhythm of these experiences is the first step. Observation becomes a guide. Noticing how situations repeat, how promises lapse, or how energy is drained allows the empath to see the cycle clearly. From this vantage point, action is not about hardening the heart or abandoning compassion. Rather, it is about learning to respect the first signals of unease, to pair intuition with careful observation, and to create gentle yet firm boundaries. The path toward clarity lies not in denying empathy, but in integrating insight, discernment, and the courage to act in alignment with what the heart senses and the mind observes. Only when these threads, intuition, observation, attachment, and care, are woven with awareness, can the empath begin to step out of the pattern that has repeated unnoticed for so long. The following guidance offers practical ways to honor signals, align intention with insight, and navigate relationships without losing the profound sensitivity that defines the empathic heart. Honoring the first signal of unease. The very first flicker of discomfort, a tightening in the chest, a quiet hesitation, a subtle shift in energy, is the heart's early alert system. For an empath, these signals arrive softly, almost as if whispered, and yet they are profound. Too often they are muted by hope, loyalty, or the desire to maintain harmony. Honoring them means giving them space to exist, without immediately layering explanation, justification, or dismissal. Notice the patterns that accompany these early signals. Perhaps a friend repeatedly promises one thing and does another. A colleague consistently sidesteps accountability, or a partner's actions occasionally clash with their words. These early hints are the raw materials of insight, delicate, easily overlooked, but persistent when observed over time. The empath who attends to the first flicker of unease begins to map a subtle landscape of alignment and misalignment, creating clarity before overwhelm sets in. Honoring these signals is not about reacting impulsively, nor about hardening the heart. It is about acknowledgement, feeling the unease, observing it, and allowing it to inform perception. Each whisper of warning is an invitation to conscious attention, a chance to notice what is unfolding beneath the surface before attachment, hope, or compassion dampens its clarity. The first signal is fleeting, yet when recognized, it becomes a guidepost, a quiet marker of truth in a world that often insists on appearances over depth. Aligning intuition with observation and boundaries. Honoring the first flicker of unease is only the beginning. The empath's subtle signals, those initial ripples, gain power when paired with attentive observation and the quiet establishment of boundaries. Intuition is the messenger, but observation provides the context, noticing patterns, shifts in energy, inconsistencies between words and actions, or the small but persistent disruptions in alignment. Boundaries are not barriers. They are expressions of self-respect, a quiet, conscious choice to preserve your dignity and energy, to protect your heart, to give care intentionally rather than endlessly. You do not need to pour more into a leaking bucket. You can do less, wisely, reserving your compassion to those who deserve and to what truly aligns with your values. This is not cold-heartedness. It is self-respect and self-compassion. It's your consciousness honoring your own well-being while remaining compassionate. It is the quiet mastery of giving without losing yourself. Boundaries transform sensitivity into strength. They allow your heart to move freely, to engage fully when it matters, and to step back without guilt when it does not. In this way, care becomes intentional, energy is preserved, and the empath learns that true generosity arises from balance, not overextension. You may notice, for instance, a colleague who repeatedly promises support, yet fails to follow through. A friend whose gestures of warmth are uneven and unpredictable. Or a manager who assigns responsibility, but fails to honor commitments, leaving you carrying more than your fair share. The intuitive signal registers, a tightening in the chest, a shadow of doubt in the mind. Observation confirms the pattern, the slow accumulation of minor dissonances, the repeated lapses that may otherwise be rationalized away. Boundaries, gentle but firm, allow the empath to engage consciously, choosing when to step forward and when to step back, honoring both intuition and reality. This alignment does not harden the heart or diminish empathy. Rather, it provides a protective clarity. Intuition alone can whisper, but paired with observation of patterns and respectful limits, it becomes a map, a guide to navigate complex emotional landscapes. The empath begins to recognize the subtle difference between hope tied to wishful thinking and hope grounded in reality. They notice the distinction between connection that enriches and connection that drains. In learning this balance, The empath cultivates a graceful dance, sensing with depth, observing with attentiveness, and acting with mindful boundaries. The signals are no longer fleeting or muffled. They are acknowledged, contextualized, and met with discernment, creating a space where care can coexist with clarity. Balancing compassion with emotional discernment. For an empath, compassion is a heartbeat, steady and unrelenting. It draws you toward others, toward their pain, toward the silent burdens they carry. The urge to soothe, to understand, to offer care without hesitation is not weakness. It is the very essence of sensitivity. Yet, in its purest form, untempered by discernment, compassion can become a double-edged force. It extends infinitely, sometimes beyond the bounds of reciprocity, leaving the heart tender, the energy stretched, and the intuition muted. Buddha said, "True compassion without wisdom is doing without knowing. True wisdom without compassion is knowing without doing." This insight frames the challenge for empaths. Care without awareness can unintentionally invite harm or imbalance, while wisdom without empathy can feel cold or detached. You may recognize it in the colleague who leans on you repeatedly for guidance, yet seems unaware or unresponsive to the support you offer. Or the friend who seeks solace in your presence, but avoids the responsibility of accountability. Every time you step in to help, the flicker of unease registers faintly. Perhaps a tension in the body, a hesitation in thought, but the pull of compassion nudges you forward. It is a gentle insistence, a quiet gravity that outweighs caution. The pattern emerges slowly, imperceptibly at first. Each act of giving, each moment of forbearance accumulates. You notice the mismatch between effort and acknowledgement, between care offered and boundaries respected. Yet the desire to remain present softens the edges of observation. Compassion, by its nature, bends the empath toward connection, even when subtle signals whisper that the alignment is imperfect. In this space, discernment acts as a subtle partner to compassion. It does not diminish care, it merely frames it, offering the empath a way to sense the weight of giving without losing sight of the broader landscape. Recognition of patterns, the unmet expectations, the uneven reciprocity, becomes the lens through which care is measured, not curtailed. Here, compassion and discernment coexist, each informing the other. One opens the heart, the other guides it. The empath lives within this delicate tension, feeling deeply yet attuned to the signals that indicate imbalance. Compassion without awareness can stretch endlessly. Discernment without tenderness can harden prematurely. The dance between the two shapes, the emotional landscape, allowing sensitivity to remain vibrant, insight to remain clear, and the heart to sustain itself even when the currents of care pull strongly toward another's needs. Here, the paradox is palpable: to care fully and yet see clearly, to give without being blind, to extend empathy while observing patterns. The heart moves with warmth, yet not indiscriminately. The mind notices without dampening feeling. In balancing compassion with discernment, the empath navigates the world with both depth of feeling and clarity of perception, honoring others without losing themselves in the process. This is the art of giving fully while staying whole. Recognizing impermanence and letting go of outcomes. For an empath, attachment to outcomes often threads quietly through every interaction, coloring hope with expectation and care with subtle tension. The mind may observe patterns clearly, intuition may whisper warnings, And yet the heart clings to a friend's promise, a partner's affection, a family's support, imagining continuity where impermanence quietly rules. The paradox of empathy lies here. To feel deeply is to hope, and to hope is to risk alignment with illusions of permanence. You might notice it in repeated cycles: a promise made, but not fully kept, a gesture of warmth that comes sporadically, a pattern of inconsistency that persists despite subtle signals that something is off. The empath senses it, sometimes as a tightening in the chest, sometimes as a subtle hesitation in thought. But the heart leans on familiarity, on the memory of better moments, and on the quiet insistence that things should follow a trajectory of care. Impermanence, however, is a constant companion. Relationships shift, priorities change, intentions waver. Recognizing this is not cynicism. It is an acknowledgement of reality's subtle flux. The empath may witness the same gestures repeated, the same cycles of promise and lapse, and feel the weight of both hope and understanding. The tension arises not from a lack of insight, but from the quiet expectation that alignment should endure against the natural ebb and flow of human imperfection. The heart may wish for resolution, for consistency, for assurance, yet impermanence reminds it that such outcomes cannot be guaranteed. Each unfulfilled expectation, each subtle misalignment becomes a teacher in observation, rather than a verdict on one's own perception. The empath learns to witness the pattern without demanding immediate correction, to feel care without anchoring it to a fixed result. Even in repeated cycles of hope met with partial alignment, the signals remain clear. The flickers of intuition, the tensions of observation, the quiet misalignments. These are markers of reality, not reflections of inadequacy. Understanding impermanence allows the empath to hold both care and clarity simultaneously, to experience warmth without assuming permanence, to give attention without anchoring it to an unchanging outcome, and to observe the shifting currents of human behavior with awareness rather than disappointment. Here, letting go of attachment to outcomes does not dampen empathy, it deepens it. The empath feels fully, yet with a subtle knowledge that life, people, and circumstances are in constant motion. Sensitivity is maintained, discernment is strengthened, and the heart retains its capacity for connection, even as it moves gracefully within the natural rhythm of impermanence. Reclaiming clarity and freedom. After tracing the subtle currents that keep an empath caught in cycles of hope, attachment, and overlooked intuition, a larger truth emerges. Sensitivity is not weakness. The heart's depth, its capacity to feel and perceive beyond the surface, is a rare gift. Being attuned to nuance, noticing the flickers of misalignment, and sensing unspoken currents in others, these are marks of profound emotional sophistication, not fragility. Clarity, in this context, becomes the companion of freedom. It is not a shield that stops disappointment from occurring, nor a guarantee that others will act in harmony with one's intentions. Rather, it is the lucidity with which the empath can observe, recognize patterns, and honor the signals that intuition provides. When perception is paired with boundaries, quiet, firm, compassionate boundaries, the empath gains a space where care does not dissolve into overextension, and connection does not require sacrificing discernment. Imagine the empath who, through repeated experience, has learned to notice the subtle hesitations in others' words, the shifts in energy, the inconsistencies that once went unheeded. Awareness alone does not prevent the storm, yet it shapes the way the heart moves within it. Each step, each engagement is measured not by cynicism, but by the intimate understanding that sensitivity need not be a doorway to depletion. The empath can remain tender, compassionate, and engaged while maintaining a rhythm that honors both self and others. Freedom is thus not the absence of challenge, betrayal, or imperfection. It is the ability to navigate them without losing the essence of one's empathic heart. Boundaries are the architecture of this freedom. Clarity, its guiding light. Together, they form the framework within which an empath can continue to give, to connect, to care deeply, yet remain upright, centered, and intact. In the Buddha's teaching, suffering does not arise from feeling deeply, but from clinging to what cannot be held. When hope loosens its grip and perception is allowed to stand on its own, the heart does not close. It steadies. Compassion remains, but it is no longer entangled. Care continues, but it is no longer self-erasing. The cycle of overlooked signals and repeated patterns need not define the empath's experience. Each recognition, each moment of noticing, strengthens the capacity to engage without dissolving, to hope without clinging, and to remain sensitive without surrendering vitality. Here lies the quiet empowerment of the empath, not in changing others, not in controlling outcomes, but in seeing clearly, letting go wisely, and allowing insight to shape the heart's engagement with the world. If this wisdom resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to join us on the path of conscious living.